Welcome to What's Your St. John's Story, a 30-minute segment sponsored by St. John's United, highlighting connectivity within our community through storytelling. I am Rachel Simonson with the St. John's Foundation, and today we're talking about family services at St. John's. And my guests are Trudi Paulson, Director of Family Services, and Lori Kopp, the Adoption and Birth Parent Program Supervisor. And adoption, birth parent counseling, family services in general is something that not many people know about at St. John's. It's one of our best kept secrets. So before we start delving into the secrets, Lori, tell me a little bit about how you came to St. John's and a little bit about what you do.
Sure. So it was about 10 years ago, and I wasn't sure if I was ready to go back to work or not. I'd been staying home with my son for about 5 years, and there was an ad in the newspaper back when that was the primary advertising, and this ad caught my eye. It was a Lutheran Social Services for a birth parent adoption counselor. It caught my eye, thought about it, I kept being drawn to it, and I sent my application in, and 10 years later, here I am.
And you have a background in social work.
I do, yep. Have been doing social work since 1998 with a couple breaks in there for staying home with my kids. And now my role is the adoption program supervisor, as well as doing birth parent adoption counseling and work with adoptive families.
Wonderful. Well, we'll explore that in depth. And Trudi,
Yes.
Trudi Paulson, how did you come to St. John's United?
So I've been in my current role as Director of Family Services since 2018, and worked for St. John's a couple years prior to that in the home health hospice program. And really my history with LSS is even longer because about 20 years ago I was the birth parent adoption counselor in Bozeman, where Lori is. And so I've always just been connected to St. John's in a variety of ways, and when moved to Billings and had the opportunity to come here and then be part of the family services, it was a wonderful opportunity.
Oh, fantastic. And I'd like to give you a chance to talk a little bit about LSS, which is Lutheran Social Services of Montana, and how did that come to be part of St. John's? Because that was its own entity at one time.
Correct, yeah. So St. John's was its own entity, Lutheran Social Services of Montana. Started in the 1950s. It was a group of Lutherans of various denominations that came together and said, we want to provide social ministry for people in need in Montana. What can we do? And out of there, that conversation, Lutheran Welfare Association was formed. And then it was about 1954 when the need really for adoption services came to be, and then that's when the agency became licensed as an adoption agency by the state of Montana. So we've been doing adoption since the 1950s. And then about 10 years later, the name changed again and it became Lutheran Social Services of Montana, and continue to provide adoption services, birth parent work, along with a variety of different programs and services. And then it was in the early 2000s, the aughts I think it was, I don't know exactly when, the board of directors from LSS came to St. John's and said, we would like to have a conversation with you. We need some support, some guidance. What can we do so that we can continue to do this good work? But it's challenging to do that, the social ministry, human services work in the state of Montana. And so over those years, St. John's became the primary, I don't want to say owner, but the entity that kind of incorporated LSS into it. And then when St. John's rebranded in 2019 was it? We made the decision to drop the name Lutheran Social Services because we really are part of St. John's. And so that's how we became St. John's United Family Services. And so we do birth parent adoption work, mental health counseling. We have work with youth in the foster care system through the Wendy's Wonderful Kids program. We have a great new program called CARES for Youth and Families, which is a wraparound high fidelity model working with families to keep them intact. And historically, we've done refugee resettlement, we've done disaster relief, a bunch of different things. Again, really all about serving the people of Montana.
It is the best kept secret
Yeah.
at
Yeah.
St. John's,
Yeah.
absolutely. But because we're going to focus today on the adoption process and
Correct.
all
Yeah.
that goes with that, let's talk a little bit, Lori, about your work. First of all, with expectant parents, the adoptive parent journey. Where would you like to start with that?
Well, I think, we can talk a little about our work with expectant parents. And really, we work with men and women across the state of Montana. We are a licensed adoption agency, and men and women who are facing an unplanned pregnancy will often reach out to our agency. And really, that's where it starts. And I would say that we meet them where they are. We offer non-judgmental, compassionate services to the men and women that come to us facing unplanned pregnancies. Kind of the initial interaction context of the meeting is we're really assessing for basic needs. Do you have housing? Do you have food? Do you have transportation? Do you have medical care? So that really is kind of like basic social work is where it starts. When someone comes to us, we're not just jumping straight into adoption.
Right.
It really is kind of a build-up of services. So with that, once kind of all of those basic needs are assessed, we offer options or decision-making counseling to talk about you're facing an unplanned pregnancy. What do you think is in the best interest of the child and yourself? We love to include dads. So if we have a mom and a dad, we love to provide the services to and extended family as well. Sometimes we have extended family, grandparents, sisters, friends for support systems also come in for those services. And through that, the decision making, the options counseling, if someone decides that parenting is the best decision, we make sure that they are connected with all the community resources that they might need to be successful in parenting. If someone decides that they want to continue to pursue exploring adoption, we can help facilitate that entire process as well, to include all of the required counseling by the state of Montana, to include selection and matching of an adoptive family, and then also being part of the process of being at the hospital, the delivery, and then the placement of the child with an adoptive family.
Fantastic work that you do. I'm going to let Trudi jump in as somebody who oversees all of this work going on.
Yeah.
When it comes to helping parents decide if they are equipped to parent, what systems do you have in place? Do you ensure that your counselors have in place to make sure that everybody's making a good decision? And how impactful is it to have this CARES program on the other side, should they choose to parent
Right.
and then need support after the fact?
And the CARES program is really brand new, and it's just in Yellowstone County. Our adoption birth parent work is really statewide, so I think that the CARES program is potentially a referral source if somebody's choosing to parent, and if it's not local here in Yellowstone County, then what is a similar kind of a program, right? Because again, like Lori said, what our goal is whatever the client, the expectant parent who's coming in to see us, what is it they want? Are they getting all the factual, accurate information that they have? And are they able to see not only what's going on right now today, but to the best of their ability, what could it look like down the road? Right? And so how can we help them make those decisions in that process? And I think one of the other pieces that I also wanted to mention is all of this work that we do in working with expectant parents is free of charge. It's through generous donors who support the program over the years, over the lifetime, that really allow us to spend as much time as we need to. Lori mentioned that the state of Montana, there's very specific requirements if somebody is choosing to make an adoption plan, that we have to cover certain topics and you have so many hours, but we go well above that just because that's what happens
the right thing to do.
Right, as you're getting to know that. So when I think about the number of hours that the staff who are all, professional, educated folks do, it's a lot of hours and it takes a lot of resources to do that. So we're grateful for the support in that way.
Absolutely, and because many times these parents who are having the unplanned pregnancy, they don't have a lot of financial resources, and that would be yet another barrier to helping them make good decisions. And so it's good that we offer that at no charge.
Can I just, we've talked about expectant parents and unplanned pregnancies, but I also want to mention that we work with men and women who are also parenting young children.
Yeah.
So if someone is parenting a young child and they're struggling, they need help, support, we're of course going to look at, what resources can we put in place to keep the family intact, right? That is the number one goal. But if it shifts towards needing to look at adoption, we do also place older children.
Okay, that is good to know as well. So let's take some time and think through, or have you explain to us, once somebody does make the decision that they would like to place their child for adoption, if you are a prospective adoptive parent, what qualifies you? What makes you a good
How do you get there?
How do you get there?
How do you get there? So again, as I mentioned, with expectant parents, we do work within the state of Montana with families across the state. And really, the process starts with a phone call to our agency, asking questions. Sometimes an email through the website, asking questions, wanting information about our infant adoption program or young child adoption program. Kind of moves into an information meeting, a face-to-face interaction where we get to know the family gets to know us, moves into an application phase, a home study phase, an adoption education preparation workshop. It is a lot. We have a lot of contact with prospective adoptive families, and this process can often take up to a year, sometimes a year and a half, depending, kind of the timing of when they inquire. So I would say it's very thorough, and we really develop relationships with our prospective adoptive families, so that when we're sitting with a pregnant woman and she's making a decision or she's looking at families, we can say, we do know those families. We have spent time in their home. We have vetted them as being a good fit for an adoptive family.
Yeah. And how about how do the prospective adoptive parents, do they pay fee for service for that? You hear about these adoptions, they go to an attorney and it costs tens of thousands of dollars. Talk a little bit about how St. John's United Family Services handles that.
Right, so it is a fee for service, and so it's right around $15,000. That's just probably the easiest way, and to say it. And we break it down into, as Lori indicated, it's can be a long process, and so we break it down so it kind of at every stage, that's when the fee is paid for the services rendered. So some people say, gosh, adoption is so expensive, and it is, but it's the expense of doing this work, again, the professional work that comes with this, and then we have an attorney who works with every case that we do to make sure that things are done legally, above board, ethically, and that the families are getting all the resources and the supports that they need. And the other piece that I think not everybody is aware of is there is something called the adoption tax credit, which is a federal tax credit that once the adoption is finalized, you can take all those expenses that you incurred in the adoption process, and it's around $15,000.
It's just under $15,000.
Just under 15.
Yeah.
So really, when you think about it, yes, there is the outlay at the time, but then there's a potential of really recouping a lot of that through a tax credit. And then there's people who use fundraising, and there's grants available to help families who choose to make an adoption or choose to adopt as a way to build their family. So, I think one of the things, we don't want people to be scared off by the expense.
Right.
And
again, much of the cost of the work is funded through the kindness of donors
Very much
to
so.
St.
Yep.
John's United.
Yes, which really subsidizes a lot of the work that we do.
Yeah, makes it possible,
Right,
actually.
right, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Let's talk a little bit, if you can, and if you can't, it's okay to say no. Talk about a success story, a heartwarming journey that you've had with parents or placement. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think, I don't know that I have a specific case in mind, but I would say some of the things that make a successful placement are having a prospective adoptive family be well trained and to understand adoption. Adoption is complex. There's a lot of layers to it. And so they need to understand that also that adoption is a lifelong journey. This isn't just simply I received placement, you know.
It's not just about the baby.
It's not just about the baby. Yeah. It's about the journey of adoption. So I think when I think about a successful, you know, placement, I think about an adoptive family who's open. Open to maintaining contact with birth parents. And if contact isn't possible, maintaining a spirit of open adoption. And you can do that without contact. So the spirit of open adoption means being open with your child about their story, talking about it, sharing information that you might have about the birth parents. Gosh, I think you got your red hair from your birth mom. Making those connections are so important. So families that are willing to do that. And then that really gives the child access to their story, their birth heritage, their information. And then a continuation of openness when the child becomes an adult. And maybe if there wasn't contact, then contact happens at that time. So I don't know that it's easy to just lump a success story, but I think all of those are elements of what helps a child set them up for the most success in life and navigating their adoption story and journey.
Yeah. Trudi, how about you?
Yeah, as Lori was talking about that, I think one of the pieces that I think is really unique, well, I'm really proud of the work that we do in all of our adoption work, but especially the adoption workshop, the preparation that we do, which generally, you know, before COVID, and hopefully we're going to come back to it because during COVID we did it virtually, but really we find bringing prospective adoptive families along with our staff. Again, we cover the state, families come from across the state. We've got staff in 3 offices, Billings, Bozeman, and Missoula. So we cover the state from there, and so to have everybody together all at once, making those connections so the staff get to know the prospective adoptive families. And then one of the things that we do is we bring folks who have this experience in to share their stories. And so our prospective adoptive families hear from adoptees. They hear from adoptive families who have adopted. What are the strengths, the highs, the lows, right? And they hear from birth parents. What was that experience like in the selection, in making those connections, in meeting this family, in now having a relationship 2, 5, 6, 7, however many years later. And again, I think that's the piece of the success and really the stories that come out. And a lot of them are full of joy and delight and amazement. And, you know, if you are a person of faith, you're going to say you can feel that, you can see the hand of God in that. Sure. And I don't know how it is, but it is. On the flip side, it is the incredibly sad because it's started in loss, right? And so how can it be both? But it can. And so I think that's the piece that we do a really good job of walking alongside both the person who's experiencing an unplanned pregnancy, what is that going to be like for them, as well as the adoptive family, what is that going to be like for them, and the adopted person as that child goes from an infant to an adulthood, and they experience all those highs and lows. We're there for them.
And personally, I do think that St. John's is incredibly well equipped to deal with the realities of both sides of the
Yep.
equation
Mm-hmm.
and
you
bring
have
them
to be.
together.
And you have
Yeah.
to be.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
For
So-
the lifetime too. I mean,
Yes.
it's not just placement.
Yes,
Right.
absolutely.
Post-placement work. Yeah. Yeah.
So, a couple of things to explore there, but I do want to talk about birth parent search services because adoptions are so very open these days. It's easier when a child reaches 18 or 20 and wants to know more about their family history. But for those people who were perhaps adopted in a time when it was more closed, what kinds of services do you offer for them?
Yeah, so we offer a full search and reunion service to either birth parents who made an adoption plan through our agency or adoptees who were adopted through our agency. And we provide a full gamut of services. Sometimes that's connecting adoptees and their birth parents. Sometimes it's providing grief counseling. Sometimes it's providing community resources. And sometimes it's literally helping them meet up. And it is a full range of how those search and reunion services turn out. You just never know. So, yeah, what else would you add?
And I would say like just to your the full range. I mean, I think there's times when one party is ready to engage and wants to find out. And that might be the adopted person who now is, and it could even still be as a child and is starting to realize, okay, I get why my hair is red and nobody else's hair in the family is red. I want to know more. And if they don't have an open relationship with their birth family, we can be that intermediary, right? To connect, to find the birth family. And sometimes the birth family is ready to engage and wants to build a relationship. And sometimes they're just not at that point. Yep. And so again, I think that's the important part of, I think in today's world with, Ancestry.me and the internet, people can find people fairly easily. And I think one of the things that we talk about as a staff, and then we certainly talk about it when folks reach out to us, is let's just kind of slow this down a little bit and just talk about the process, because that's a big journey to go on, and it's a big step to take. And what is it going to be like if the other person isn't quite ready?
Right.
And can you be okay with that?
Helping them work through
That
that part
again,
of the
this
process
ambiguity
too.
is ambiguity is really the big word.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then preparation.
Yeah. And then I think I also want to mention, so the state of Montana has a program called the Confidential Intermediary Program, which, and that's a service that we provide as an agency. So Lori mentioned we can, if the adoption took place through our agency, we can access our records. But even if somebody was adopted in the state of Montana, but not through our agency, we can, as a confidential intermediary, do that searching work, which again sometimes finds great connections and sometimes comes up at a dead end.
Sure.
Because again, back to your point of, years ago, unfortunately records weren't kept.
Yeah.
People didn't have a lot of information, and so again, then. But we're willing to be there.
Yeah, you're helping people connect with either the joy or perhaps the letdown, the disappointment, and then the aftermath of all that. And I think we need to say again, that is something that donors support.
Very much so.
You received a very nice grant from American Lutheran Church here in
Billings.
To help with that process and help people who are searching for their history.
Yeah.
And we have been able to use that a couple of times recently, which has really been a gift for those particular people that needed the help to be able to do the search.
Yeah.
Great. Well, we have just a couple of minutes left. And as we do with everybody who comes to visit at this set, I'd like to ask you just if I were to run into you out in the street and just randomly said, what is your St. John story? How would you respond? Lori? try that first?
Sure. So I think my St. John's story is, 10 years ago when I started at St. John's, I could have never anticipated, one, that I'd probably still be here 10 years later. But what I couldn't anticipate is the integrity and the organization that I was walking into and becoming an employee of. St. John's is truly an organization that lives out its mission, and that's what keeps me here, is being able to provide an exceptional service to people in the community and to really love them with integrity. And I think that's what keeps me here, relationships, connections over the years.
Thank you. And Trudi.
I think what came to mind when you asked that question, Rachel, was the word connection. And I think that's what we've been kind of talking about in this time, is those connections. What is family? Sometimes it is blood, right? And the genetics, and sometimes it's not. And it's the love and it's the relationship that's built. So whether it is the connection of within the family system, or it's the support of the community, or if it's the work that we do as an adoption agency, or within the larger St. John's organization, I think connection flows through it all and brings it and keeps it together. And I would very much echo what Lori said too.
Yep. Any last thoughts? Well, if not, I would like to thank you for sharing one of the best kept secrets at St. John's. And it's just one aspect of what you do at St. John's United Family Services. And I'm really pleased that you were able to come here and talk about that today. And if anybody wants more information on adoption services, birth parent, expectant parent counseling, anything that you do, what's the best way for them to reach you?
Really, probably the best way is to just call me. My number is 586-2486, and pick up the phone and direct you to where you would need to go.
Yeah, and I would imagine on the website we have some information,
Yes.
stjohnsunited.org, and then you are under the services.
Correct, yep.
For family
And
services.
there's adoption and counseling and expectant parents.
Right, so there's also an inquiry you could just send in through our website, and
the
those come
contact us
directly
link,
to me.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for being here today, and thank you all for watching, and we will look forward to sharing more of What's Your St. John's Story with you in the future.
For generations, St. John's has united us with its uplifting vision and lives it has touched. There are thousands of stories about St. John's. Prayers answered for a long-awaited adoption, pain-free relief after healing from injury, settling into a new home for the next phase of life, the comfort of compassionate end-of-life care, the joy that comes from volunteering, and at-home help that supports the fullest life. At St. John's, we are creating community and bringing families together. We offer many services for home, health, and family, from childcare, support for an unplanned pregnancy, and physical therapy, to home health care, senior living services, and hospice care. For all times of life, we are here for you. The heartwarming stories of St. John's are woven into the fabric of our community. What's your St. John's story?